move to the different types of observation. Observation comes into different types depending on the purpose and the aims and the wants of the observer. But according to what I have read, I have tried to classify them into types because there are a lot. So I try to classify them according to the generality. So observation differs according to the position first, according to the position of the observer, like to take part or not to take part. The second thing, I'm going to go back to each separately. The second one is according to control, whether we put control or we provide conditioning to our participants or not. And the third thing, according to participant awareness, whether they are aware of being observed or not. Let's start by the last one. According to participants' awareness. Now, we can observe, or sometimes while observing, most, if not the majority of researchers and observers do not tell their informants or their participants that they are under observation. So, like this, or this process is called an indirect observation or a hidden observation. A hidden observation or indirect observation is the one that, or is the one where the researcher does not tell their informants that they are observed. So there is no awareness, there is no knowledge that the participants are under investigation. As opposed to that, direct observation or visible observation is the one that entails the researcher to tell and inform the participants that they are under investigation and their behavior is observed, which means that the researcher is visible. Whereas in the other one, in the other type, the researcher is hidden. Okay, there are some ethical issues with regard to this type, but in order to achieve the requirements of the study and the purpose of the study, some or most researchers do not tell their informants that they have been observed. So this is for awareness. So awareness refers to the knowledge of being observed. Whether if the participants know that they are observed, then the researcher is visible and is exercising a direct observation. If participants do not know that they are observed, they are not aware of being observed, therefore the researcher is hidden and exercising an indirect observation. Now, for the second type, that observation differs according to control. And if you remember, the term control is tightly related to experiments. So we say controlling the behavior or conditioning the behavior. In this case, you might ask the question like, we have said that observation is related to naturally occurring behavior. How can we control the behavior of participants and call it a part of observation? This is a good question that is going to be asked here. If we do not control participants' behaviors, that is, we do not add anything to their behavior, no circumstances, no other variables, no other additions to their behaviors, we just let them free, we just let them naturally behaving. So in this case, the observation that we are doing is uncontrolled. The participants are not conditioned and their behavior is not conditioned. However, if we sometimes introduce a given variable or a given circumstance or a given idea on the behavior of the participants, what we are going to observe is not the natural behavior, but rather the results of what I have given as condition. I'll simplify this in an example. If back to the same example I am doing, we are observing students' performance. Okay, so when you just as an observer enter a given class, or you start and then you start observing the students' behavior. So like that, the behavior is going to be natural. They do not know your identity, whether you are observing or you are just a student among them. So like this, you are going to observe the naturally occurring behavior, and therefore your observation is uncontrolled observation. That is, there is no control, no conditioning upon the behavior of participants, which means that you just observe them, how they perform in the classroom, how they participate, how they ask questions, how they present, and so forth. And everything is going to be natural without your interference. There is no interference, no conditioning, and no other external, let's say, conditions or external items. However, in the same context, you can introduce other kinds of or other types or other kinds of conditions or behaviors. Like you are the teacher and you want to observe how your participants react to a given teaching method. So like this, your group is going to be the students, and then you are going to control their behavior through the method imposed or through the conditions imposed. That is, what they are going to show as reactions are not as behavior, but as their natural behavior, but the result of what you have introduced as condition. I can tell you a simple example of this. For example, student performance outside the classroom in comparison with students' anxiety before exams. If we measure the type of anxiety or the degree of anxiety while being outside the department and before the exam for around 5 minutes, here the behavior is different. Why? Because this one, the first one, being outside is natural and spontaneous and there is no conditioning, whereas the second one is under condition and the condition is the examination. So like that, the behavior that I am observing or the result that I am observing is not the natural one as the first one, but rather the controlled one. So like that, what I am observing is the controlled behavior, and therefore I am tackling a controlled observation. As far the first type is concerned, for the position of the observer, of the researcher. So, this one is very important in ethnographic research, and if you remember in the first semester, we have dealt with the different methods, and among those methods was the ethnographic method. And we have said that the ethnography is the study of people's life in order to know more about their social reality. So, in order to know about more about the social reality of our participants, we can take part in the same society or community or the community observed. That is, we can be a member of this society and observe and interact with them. And just if you are, for example, dealing with how people speak, you just take part in the community, you start speaking the language, you interact with people in order to understand not only the linguistic reality but also the social reality associated to this linguistic behavior. As opposed to that, you can also be or you can observe the behavior of the community or the group, but you can be a non-participant, and non-participant means that you do not take part in this in the observed group. You do not take part or interfere in the context, and you do not share the details with your participants, as opposed to the first one where you share the details and you live their lives. But in the non-participant observation, you are an outsider. That is, you just see how people behave in this community without taking part, without interacting with them, without speaking with them, without exercising the same social realities with them. So these are the three types of observation that one can use while selecting for observation as their research instruments. Now we come to the different merits of observation, like the advantages of observation. I've been saying from the very beginning that observation gathers or collects what is naturally occurring, that except in conditioned observation or controlled observation. Otherwise, everything that is collected in observation is naturally occurring. Like when we say something natural, something that is spontaneous, something that has not been affected by being observed or not, being seen or not, and nothing else is interfering in the process of the behavior or the event observed. The second thing as an advantage for observation is that subjectivity of the informants can be eliminated. Okay, informants do not know that they are observed, and therefore their subjectivity is eliminated. By subjectivity here we mean their behavior or their attitudes towards this, or when they know about being observed and they start changing their behavior, or things like so while it's not the same like questionnaires or interviews. Like when you give a questionnaire to them, they tend to be quite subjective or not even paying attention to your questionnaire and to the IDs that you are gathering. So they just start lying and giving you back your questionnaire, and that's the idea. Similarly for interviews, they can be so much into the topic as they can be just lying in order to suit you or just give impressive answers to your questioning. But in observation, if they are not aware of being observed, they are not going to give you what suits your research objectives, but they are going to give you reality. And that's why data are collected afresh, which makes analysis rich qualitatively. Of course, like when you start observing this group and the other group, this event and the other event, in this timing and another timing, in this context and in different contexts and so forth, you will see that by the end of the day, your checklist or your field notes book is going to be filled with data, with information, with remarks, with additions, and with comments and so forth. So like that, your work is going to be rich, and therefore the analysis of data is going to be richer. And by qualitatively here, we do not only mean the qualitative descriptions and so forth, but even what is quantitative. And we said that quantity refers to numbers, and that answers are given, or answers can be categorized or can be counted, and therefore summarized in numbers, statistics, and figures, and so forth. So likewise, what you are going to collect after the observation can be qualitative in nature as the different tags, as it can be quantitative, and it is the result of your checklist, especially if you have been observing or you have been counting or taking tokens of the variables that you have seen, whether there is variation or not, there is accommodation or not, there is a difficulty or not, or which type of difficulty is there. If, for example, you are observing a group of people of 30 participants, and you are studying their difficulties in pronunciation, and in those difficulties or difficulties in language learning, for example, and you classify in your checklist like they have difficulties in pronunciation, in speaking, in writing, in vocabulary, in interaction, in communication, in this and in that, and these are categorizations or categories that you only, when you observe, you only have to make tokens and you count how many participants have shown this behavior and how many others have shown the other behavior. So likewise, your data is going to be quantitatively rich. Field notes also are going to give you qualitative data for your research. However, observation can also have some demerits, like I am observing what I want to observe, and I am interpreting the things as my mind tells me. Sometimes we see, but we interpret differently. This is why it's said that وَجَعَلْنَا لَكُمُ السَّمْعَ وَالْأَبْصَارَ. So we hear similarly, but we notice or we analyze differently, or what we see. It can be analyzed differently from one researcher to another, and therefore can be let's say interpreted differently from one observer to another according to what we have observed. The second thing is that sometimes we observe a given angle, but we neglect the other one. We neglect the circumstances, we neglect the environment, we neglect other things that we cannot notice, and we did not notice actually while observing. Like this, observation can introduce some researcher bias and subjectivity in the recording of data and in the documentation of data, unless you restrict your data or the information you want to something that is structural. When you structure things, you're going to limit yourself to those things, and therefore you will be objective somehow. Other things, so if you want to take observation as your research instrument, you have to, I believe, pay attention to all those things. And the very first thing that I always highlight is whether it is adequate for your research or not. Like, if your research is about something cognitive, your observation is not the right thing. If your research deals with something that is concrete, that is natural, that is always occurring, and you can have access to it, then just go for it, go directly, and take all the procedures into account. That's all for today's lecture. If you have any other questions or comments, never hesitate to contact me. Thank you very much for your kind attention, and I hope to see you in other opportunities. Thank you.